Okay, why don't we go ahead and open up our book to page number 10 for the second selection of Unit 1, Against All Odds. Yesterday we read the selection Fire, which was a nonfiction selection telling us how to properly get out of a home in case of a house fire, and letting us know that the best way to get out of a house safely is to practice, so making sure that we had an escape route. Today we're going to read a fiction selection. What does it mean to have a fiction selection? What's fiction?
Not true.
Not true, all right? Sometimes it's based partially on truth, all right? And this selection does have some reality to it. And as you can see on page number 10, Escape from Pompeii. Pompeii is an actual place. In fact, we have read several selections based on mythology stories and ancient civilizations. What was one civilization that we read about in our mythology unit? What was one place that we read about? What was that big war? Yes, Cameron. The Trojan War. And where did that take place? Where? Well, Greece went to this place. Where was it? No. Trojan War. Oh, come on, you know. Troy, thank you. So Troy is one of the ancient civilizations. Where was Helen from? Helen of... Odysseus was from Ithaca. Menelaus and Helen lived in, started with an S. Sparta, very good. So we talked about Sparta, we looked at Troy. I know it's been a while, we had Christmas break. We had Sparta, we had Ithaca, and we had Troy. And now we're looking at Pompeii. Pompeii was an actual place, and it was near Rome, all right? I don't want you to get Pompeii mixed up with the leader Pompey, which some of you have studied in world history class. And he was one of the leaders with Julius Caesar in that first triumvirate, all right? But Pompeii was an actual civilization, and it was destroyed in ancient times by a volcano eruption, all right? And this story is about that very event, all right? So let's look at here. It says, Escape from Pompeii. How did Antonius escape the fury of the volcano? All right. What types of problems might a volcano eruption cause? What kind of problems might it cause?
Like burning things, like burning down buildings.
Burning down buildings, definitely fire. So we can see the connection from our last story. So fire is definitely going to be a problem. Javier?
Cover a whole land in ash.
Okay, ash is definitely going to be a problem. You're all way too young to even know about the Mount St. Helens eruption in Washington state in the United States, but ash was definitely a problem in that state.
Kill animals.
What's that?
Kill animals and stuff.
Killing the animals and people around, absolutely. Anything else other than fire and ash from a volcano? What is that substance that comes out of volcanoes? Smoke? Fire? What did you say? Lava, that molten rock, right? Really hot molten rock. Okay. Other than the state of Washington, any other state that you know of in our country that has active volcanoes? Hawaii, very good. All right. I'm going to read the first paragraph, and then I'm going to call on volunteers to continue the reading. We're going to look for main ideas and specific details like we did yesterday. When we see a main idea, what are we going to do to it? We're going to circle the main idea. And when we see specific details, what are we going to do to our specific details? Underline. Okay. Now keep in mind that this is a fiction reading. So our main ideas are going to be in the introduction of our story, and our specific details are going to be in the rising action and climax of our story. All right? So let's begin. It says, I had to run to keep up with Antonius, my master. I had never seen him so mad. As we moved through the crowded streets, the ground shook slightly. But tremors were nothing new to Pompeii. Our task was important. Weeks ago, Antonius had ordered a supply of olive oil from the merchant Bassus. It still had not arrived. We had little left. Like others in Pompeii, we used olive oil for food, fuel, and medicines. I glanced up at Mount Vesuvius, rising in the distance. The great mountain seemed friendly, as if it was watching over us. Okay, now with fiction, we need to know setting. Where does this story take place? That would be a specific detail. Where does it take place? Stephen?
crowded street. Like a crowded
Okay, a street. It takes place on a street, so definitely circle that. Javier?
Pompeii.
Pompeii, that would be the city. And what other important geographic region would we circle? Pompeii, city street, and Mount Vesuvius. That's a hard word to say, Vesuvius. Okay. Other than setting, what else is important to remember in a fiction story? We need to know when, where, and how, and who. Who. Our characters. So what character names have we already heard? Antonius, Bassus, and there's one other. We don't know the name. We don't know the name, but we know a pronoun. What's the pronoun? Bassus, yes. Well, master, yes. But what's the pronoun? What point of view is this story being told from? I. And because it's told from I, it is first person. You're right, Trey. So first person point of view. Okay? Make sure you write first person point of view in your margin. It's important to know that because anytime a story is told from first person point of view, it's very credible. Okay? Okay. Now I just read the introduction to the story. We have the setting established, we have characters established, and we have kind of a conflict established. Olive oil's running low, it's been promised, and it hasn't been delivered. All right? Anytime somebody orders something and it hasn't been delivered, you get a little upset, right? Okay, it's been promised to you, you probably paid for it. Okay, so you know there's a little bit of tension. Who would like to continue reading the next section? All right, Chris, continue.
Bassus was just coming out of his house when we arrived. Antonius sputtered a loud, long series of insults at him. I stood to the side and listened to the birds chirping in the trees. Suddenly, over the shouting, there was a thunderous crack. We froze, and Antonius's hands stopped in midair. I turned toward Mount Vesuvius and gasped. The top of the mountain had split open and a cloud of smoke burst forth. How strange, Bassus said softly. Bassus was merely curious, but Antonius was alarmed. While the smoke distracted Bassus, my master motioned for me to follow him. He stopped several feet away, where two of Bassus's horse were tied to a wooden post. He quietly untied one. Without a word, he lifted me on the horse's back and then climbed in front of me.
Top of the next page. Good. Continue.
Antonius glanced back at Bassus, who was still gazing in wonder at the mountain. Bassus was shocked when he saw us on his horse. Where do you think you're going, thief? I told you, you'll get your oil tomorrow. I'm borrowing your horse, Bassus, Antonius said, as payment for your lateness, and I urge you to follow closely behind. That mountain is much angrier than I am. Bassus stood dumbfounded, unable to respond. My master turned to the horse and we rode off.
All right, let's look at that part of the rising action. What are some important details that we learned about the story? What did Antonius do that we learned? What did he do, Trey?
He took the horse.
He stole the horse or took the horse. Make sure you underline that. Why did he take the horse? Why did he need to get away? What has happened?
Because he said that volcano was angry to him.
Good. The volcano is angry. What does it mean that the volcano is angry?
He started like rumbling and making noise.
Yes, it's rumbling, it's making noise. And at the beginning it says that Bassus was curious, but Antonius was alarmed with that noise. Why would one man be only curious at the sound of the mountain, but the other one be alarmed by the same noise? Why would that same noise make one man curious and another man alarmed? Yes?
One's like already used to it.
Used to it? Good. It's all about experience, isn't it? All right? And so obviously Antonius has been through this before and he knew that it was a problem, right? And so he knew that he needed to get away and get away fast. All right? Anything else that you found interesting in that section or important in that section that you underlined? How about the merchant? When did he promise that? What does that word dumbfounded mean? I had a student one time didn't understand that word. What does dumbfounded mean?
Like you like stunned, froze.
Yeah, kind of stunned, froze, confused, surprised, couldn't quite figure it out. Underline that word. Yep. Okay. How did Antonius explain taking the horse? What did he call it a payment for? Yes, Amani.
For being late, for giving him the olive oil.
Correct. He considered it a late payment. Consider it your late payment for being late on the olive oil. Good. Who would like to continue reading? Okay, Amani, continue.
Moments later, the first ash and stone fell on us. It was terrifying. The noise grew louder as a great fire burst from the mound. Children were calling for their parents. Birds were zooming by us at full speed. Even the horse we were riding seemed anxious. Antonius was pushing the horse as hard as he could. Master, I asked over the noise, where are we going? His response was erupt away from Pompeii. I was shocked. What? Leave Pompeii? Do you remember the earthquake, Marcus? His voice grew quieter. It was more than 15 years ago. Perhaps you were too young. I've heard about it, I said loudly. He had forgotten that my entire family had perished in the earthquake, leaving me alone in the world. Most of the town was damaged and I lost everything, Antonius continued. He pointed toward Mount
Vesuvius.
I'm not waiting to see what the gods have planned for me this time.
Okay, what important detail did we just learn that explains why Antonius was so alarmed, Amani?
Years ago, it was an earthquake and he lost his family.
Good. 15 years before, the same thing had happened and he lost his entire family. He had been through this before and he wasn't waiting around for it again. All right, so that's a very important detail. Okay. All right, let's turn over to the top of page number 12. Who would like to be our next reader? Okay, Javier.
As we made our way out of town, it was clear that Pompeii was in a state of confusion. People were running around frantically, and other women raised her arms and carried out to the mountain. What had we done? We saw people boarding up their windows and closing their doors. We heard a father call to his crying children, "Go inside, you will be safe there." So some people were trying to save their positions. One man stranded under the weight of a heavy chair. His cart already held several beautiful works of art. Two women were wearing their best clothing and jewelry, and a few others like us were on horseback and carried nothing. Just outside Pompeii was chaos. The ash and stone mixed with some of the fury material. Heavily, people around us were going in all different directions. Some were headed toward the sea, others were headed south. No one rode toward Rome. Angry Mount
Vesuvius.
Vesuvius stood in the way. Antonius and I moved quickly with no positions to slow us down. The ash continued to pile up. Day turned into night as Mount Vesuvius' black cloud filled the sky and swallowed the sun.
All right. What important detail did we just learn now about the eruption? What is happening now to the skies? Amani?
They're like the black cloud, they filled the sky.
Good. So day has really turned into tonight because of all the cloud and the dust and the dense smoke. All right. We learned yesterday the smoke from fire can be quite dense so that you can't even see through it. So here we're seeing not only does a house fire be that way, but also the smoke and the fire from a volcano can be much the same way. Yesterday we learned that the fire from a house fire can also be very toxic. Do you think the same will be true for a volcano? Yes. All right. So the father sent the children inside. It'll be safe inside. Do you think those children are safe inside the home?
No.
What do you think is going to happen to that home?
The windows can bust.
The windows could bust out. It could burn down. All right. They're going to be trapped inside, aren't they? Do any of you know what happened to the people of Pompeii? Most of them did die, and years later when they excavated the site, many of the people were encased in the ash and the mud, and basically They died from the smoke. And as the lava came in and the ash came in, it covered their bodies up and almost preserved the bodies in the position in which they died. Almost created sculptures out of them. All right, so it's a very interesting story. All right, let's continue. Who would like to be my next reader? Okay, Cameron?
The horse was moving slowly now. It was exhausted, and so was I. It felt like we had been riding for days, although it was only the middle of the night. We stopped on a hill to let the panting horse catch his breath. We raised our eyes from the road and glanced back at Mount Vesuvius. At the moment, an avalanche of fiery ash and rock gushed down the side of the mountain. It swept forward like a scroll, unrolling, covering everything in its path. I thought of Vesuvius and all the others we had passed along the way. I hope they had all survived.
Okay, let's look at that third line. It swept forward like a scroll unrolling, covering everything in its path. Underline that sentence. It swept forward like a scroll unrolling, covering everything in its path. We talked about figurative language last semester. Anybody know what type of figurative language that is when we use a comparison between two things?
Simile.
A simile, very good. Label that as a simile. Two unlike things using the word like or as. We had that in MCI Aqua level. Okay. How do you think the stories of survivors from Pompeii had been shared over the years? Do you think they were in newspapers, on television? No. How do you think they've been shared?
Through like different generations, I guess.
Right. Grandpa tells grandson, grandson tells the next generation, and so on, through that oral tradition, much like those mythology stories we read last semester. So as we see these stories unfold, they change from time to time, things get exaggerated and so on, but it's important for us to read these to understand the civilizations, to understand what happened to them, because it's important for us to understand and value their cultures, right? Okay, so let's turn over to the practice the skill main idea. They're going to ask you here on page number 14 to look at the fourth paragraph on page number 11, beginning with the words moments later. Okay, we need to look at the main idea. Now, unlike the nonfiction selection you had yesterday, in fiction, it's not going to be specifically stated all the time what the main idea is. We may have to put it into our own words. So let's look on page number 11 at the fourth paragraph. Okay. It says, moments later, the first ashen stone fell on us. It was terrifying. The noise grew louder as a great fire burst from the mountain. Children were calling for their parents. Birds were zooming by us at full speed. Even the horse we were riding seemed anxious. In your own words, what do you think the main idea is? What's happening?
The volcano finna start.
Start what? Okay, the volcano begins to erupt. That's our own words. That's the main idea here. Okay. And now from that main idea, we're going to find textual evidence, specific details now that are specifically explained in our paragraph to support our main idea. So now what are some examples or details that show us, in fact, the volcano is erupting? Who can give me one? Jermaine?
Noise grew louder.
Noise grew louder. Now if we use word for word, what do we need around that? Not parentheses, but quotation marks. Very good. You corrected yourself. That's a good job. What's another specific detail? Amani?
Fire burst from the mountain.
Good. Fire burst from the mountain. Who was the god of fire? That was the god of the underworld. Volcano comes from his name. Vulcan. Very good. Hephaestus was his Greek name. What was another detail from that paragraph? What about the horse?
It's
The horse was anxious. Do animals detect things that are happening in nature? Absolutely. My animals always know when some kind of storm is coming. My chocolate lab's under the bed faster than anything. Yeah. Yep. And this morning at 4 o'clock, she would not go out when she saw the snow. Okay, so everybody has 3 details, correct? Details are examples. Details can be things that support that main idea. So let's go down to question number 2. It says, what is the main idea of page 12? You're looking at the entire page now, not just one paragraph. All right? Write it in your own words. So let's look at page number 12. You're going to just glance back through it, read, see what's going on. It's all about making your way through town and what's happening. I want you to put in your own words what that main idea is. And I'm going to call on someone. Where do we typically find main ideas? First sentence. So really use that first sentence as your key. And where do we find our details? In things that follow, right? The second and so on, the subsequent sentences. Javier, share with the class what you thought the main idea of that page was.
The people of Pompeii was confused and they didn't know what to do.
Good. And they really did. If you look at the details then, they all reacted quite differently, didn't they? Okay. Some were frantic. Some had a plan. Some tried to get some possessions, which we learned yesterday. When there's a fire, you get out, right? You have a plan. When some put on clothes, which we learned yesterday, no, you don't do that. So a lot of the people made some big mistakes. From what we learned yesterday, we can probably guess the ones that got dressed, the ones that stopped to get possessions, probably did not make it out. Right? The ones who thought quickly and acted quickly, like it told us yesterday in fire, probably survived. Okay, good reading today. Good discussion today, and great way of getting our main ideas and details identified.